Okay, thank you. So thank you for inviting me here today. And thank you also for letting me speak in English, although actually I'm Australian, so some people don't even know that I speak English. So I'm going to tell you about our journey about this patient monitoring platform, which is actually more than that. And we began with a problem. We're hearing a little bit about the NHS today. These are NHS numbers. 1 patient in 10 is harmed in hospital as a result of care. Last year, 1.2 million reported adverse events, things going wrong in hospitals, up from the year before. In addition to that, 12,000 avoidable deaths in UK hospitals last year. The costs of this are very high. We reckon it's probably 5 or 6 billion pounds, probably near 5% of the NHS budget, which is kind of wasted money, because something can be done about this. This is about patient safety. Safe care is lower cost care. So, NHS problem, poor us in the UK. I would bet it's almost as bad here. It's as bad everywhere. In some places, it's worse. This is so bad, there's a word for it. Who knows the word? Iatrogenics, harmed by the doing of healthcare. That number, you can check it out. I'm not making it up. It is frightening. It is frightening. So, we really have a problem here. A lot of digital care is about, or digital health is about prevention, about doing things in the future, maybe making us better and not getting into the hospitals. Today, we have a problem. So what can you do about that? Well, one of the things, you can actually know what's happening to patients at all times. This is really important. And so you need better ways of knowing that, better monitoring, more accurate monitoring. And then build into that some kind of predictive systems. The simplest ones are what the healthcare people call early warning scores. Better still, reduce the number of people in hospital. How do you do that? Well, get them through the hospitals faster. That's one way. The other way, don't put people in hospital at all. So these are today's very real problems. Anybody who has any contact with the healthcare providers, goes into a hospital, sees their elderly mother or parent in hospital, knows this kind of stuff happens. So we looked at this and we said, how do we do something about this? And I have to say, this is the end of a long journey for me personally, or a progress along a long journey personally. But this is fundamentally what we're doing. We have developed a system called the Patient Status Engine. It works on the basis that if you can measure something, and you can measure it accurately enough, and with high enough resolution, you can model. If you can model something mathematically, you can make a prediction. If you can make a prediction, you can take an action. If you can take an action, you can start to intervene in that and do something about the original actions that caused the problems. Engineers in the room would recognize that as a control loop. That generally isn't the way it's thought of in healthcare. But that's really what happens. That's what your doctors do. This stuff in the cloud is what a good physician does. Unfortunately, there aren't enough good physicians for all the patients who need this kind of stuff. So this is really the basis of the system. This is why what we are talking about here is digital. This is a digital platform that we've created. And what it looks like then is this. It's a complete end-to-end platform. And I have to emphasize this. This isn't a product. This is a different way of looking at this, but it's a medical device. End-to-end, it's a Class 2A medical device. So it's a bit of a challenge for some of the regulators, and we've been able to get through this okay, but it comprises wearable sensors, smart patches, things that we've developed. And these are really smart, but this isn't our business. Plenty of people out there making smart patches say, I've got a smart patch, but it really doesn't solve a problem. So you've got to keep going. We have integrated wireless networks. We have things we call gateways, bedside displays, nodes into a bigger network. The bigger network connects with a back-end system of some sort. The system's doing two things at the back end. It's looking at storing data and pushing it forward, but it's also controlling the network. Look, it is really easy to make one smart patch and see an ECG or something on a mobile phone. It is a real challenge to make thousands or millions of those and put them into a network and have it scalable. And if you don't do that, you just have a toy, right? So we then complete this with things like various user interfaces, dashboards, and so on, so that you can have both local and remote access to the system. So what's it do? Well, it monitors patients continuously. In clinical terms, it performs automatic OBS all the time. And it takes that data, puts it back into the dashboards and so on. Importantly, it carries out MUSE, Modified Early Warning Scores, or in the UK, National Early Warning Scoring. These are predictive algorithms. And also, it connects easily into any existing hospital IT. So it measures basic parameters that are used across every disease state by all clinicians, all nurses. Heart rate, respiration rate, temperature, oxygen saturation, blood pressure, and some things that nurses add in that are very hard to automate, like consciousness scores. So they're added in by the bedside, straight in, paperless wards. But also the patches are smarter than that. So if you want ECG, for instance, you can request it. The devices don't normally transmit ECG because we want them to last a long time, and that burns up a lot of power. So if you want ECG, you just request it. And that was something that came from the doctors and nurses. When we first gave them this kind of thing, they said, where's the ECG? And we sort of said, well, you don't really need that, because you don't actually look at the ECG. What we found out was what they do is they eyeball these signals, and they need them for comfort. So we put that in, and we actually, what we're measuring here is every beat. We're looking at every beat. We have continuous heart rate variability, which we're using in a number of different applications for really great effect. So this is a very smart system, gathering data, processing data, and actually being used now for the care of patients. What it looks like in the configuration looks like this. Patient end, we have the sensors, we have the gateways picking up. They're going into some kind of, normally a Wi-Fi network in a hospital. There's a back end. Our lifeguard server is open. We have an open API. We're not trying to hold this data. That doesn't work, by the way. Anyone who's in digital health says, I'm going to keep all your patient data, forget it. It doesn't work. So this server is normally inside the hospital in the firewall, but it's open. So you can run different applications on that, or it can be easily connected into a hospital server. But what this means, integration into a hospital for this system is really fast. We don't expect the hospital IT people to connect every one of the gateways in. That's already done. They can just connect across a single API. And any IT people out there know that that is a really easier, much easier thing to do. So this can be used. So it can be used either as a system by itself for hospitals who don't have any IT, or it can be integrated into the IT system. But then, what if you want to extend care out of the hospital? What do you have to change with this system? Well, hardly anything. Back end stays the same. All the data is coming in. Front end stays the same. Patient at home, exactly the same devices, exactly the same gateway configuration may be presented a little differently. That, by the way, is an off-the-shelf tablet computer. What we do is use the economies of scale of the consumer electronics industry to bring the costs down of all this stuff. So but it's pushed through the regulatory process. So that's the patient at home. The only thing that changes is the network connection. So by engaging in the hospitals initially, the patients are there, they're associated with their care teams, and they can go home. And this is a really important aspect of it. We're doing a lot of work with different people in this at the moment. Many, many benefits, but it's essentially, the point here is that this is a platform. You can add things into it, it can be configured, and it can be used in a number of different ways. But it's absolutely, this last point, absolutely the future of patient monitoring at all. And here's one of our users, Dr. Heather Duncan at the Birmingham Children's Hospital, where a big system has been running now for the last 18 months. It's the obvious way to go, she says. Here is an actual quote. We didn't set this up, from a parent of a child in this study. Caleb's been through a lot, he says. And having the life touch on him, our patch, means that there are less wires around him, so we can actually be a parent to him. This hospital isn't going back, by the way. They're not going to go back and put cables and things on these children. Why would they? We have done sufficient work there to show that this is now becoming a new standard of care. And everything about this at that wireless level, forget all the big data stuff, the digital stuff, everything about it shows that this is the way it's going to go. So that's the product. Just a couple of things about who we are. So this company is relatively new, 2010, although in digital health tech terms, that's getting quite old. Personally, I've been at this for the last 10 or 15 years. And what we put this company together to do, my co-founder and I, was to look at this thing. Why was it? Plenty of technology out there, many, many big European programs, remote health monitoring, wearable tech. Where was it in use? It just wasn't. Well, a couple of reasons. The clinical evidence was generally lacking, but there was lots of anecdotal support. But more importantly, the health economic cases hadn't been established. So we realized what we had to do then was develop something to start getting the health economic evidence. So we put together our first generation product. We look at it now, it looks a bit crude. It's what a software engineer or the software people call a minimum viable product. It had to be able to be used in a clinical environment to gather data and show that all this was going to work. And that's what happened. So we made that, but it also, at that stage, it also needed to be a medical device. So we had to take that through the regulatory route right in the beginning, which meant right from the beginning, by the way, the company had to have a quality system. So we were 5 people. One person was our quality manager, because unless you build that kind of ISO 13485 thinking into your company, get down the track, it's too late to patch it in. So the whole aspect of quality and regulatory process is a really important part of what we're doing. But the other reason we made the minimum viable product was that what we really realized was that nobody knew what they wanted from this kind of system in their hospitals. Plenty of stuff being thrown at them from the tech community. If you ask a doctor, if there's doctors in the audience, forgive me for this, but if you ask a doctor what they want everything, and that's against the rules of physics sometimes and against other possibilities. So it was necessary really to take this and find out what was necessary, what a better looking product was going to look like. And so we were able then to develop our second generation system from that. We recognized then that the timescales are inevitably long, and through that process we were able to develop a realistic go-to-market strategy, and it's working. I have to say it's working. There's systems out there running in hospitals. There's some just across the water your Nordic colleagues over in Kristiansand are running systems at the moment and doing some nice stuff in Oslo. Systems in India, by the way. Great, great technology for a developing country, all of this. And just a few systems in the UK. So why are we here? Let me quickly run through the list. Always looking for customers. Always looking for customers. Distribution, exploitation partners also. Anybody who's developing new sensor technologies, that's of interest because we have the open platform. And also financial partners, because wherever we're going with this, we need working capital really to stimulate the market and develop the market. So that's the story for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. I think the good news listening to this is that we need more drugs so people don't end up in hospital, and I think that's positive. That was a joke. So any questions from the audience, please? We're on one in the middle here.
Hi, my name is Lena. Hi, my name is Lena. Great product, but I wanted to check if you can share any data in resolving the problem you set out to solve, which was about the killer care and the number of people who did die as a result of overcare or lack of care or whatever it was.
The actual
Repeat the question. I don't think everybody heard it. So
I think the question was, can we share any data on solving the initial problem on the killer care? Can we? The position on that is it's not yet published, but it's coming. It takes time to build up that kind of thing from real evidence. The health economics that we've had done by various third parties shows that it absolutely is working. But I'll give you a very good example, just some recent work we did in India. We did a very short study in a big hospital chain there, and we picked up deteriorations in 3 patients who would otherwise not have been spotted by the nursing staff. 2 of those, I think, arguably we saved the lives of. 3rd one we didn't, because we had no way of being able to inform the nursing staff when we saw this happening. And as a result of that, the hospital said, absolutely, we need this. And how you quantify that, I don't know. How do you quantify a life in those terms? But absolutely, these things are happening. And we've seen that, the study in Birmingham, they've got many, many instances of early detection of deteriorating children and much earlier entry into a critical care unit as a result of that.
Thank you.
Yes, there's one more.
Thank you for the presentation. It's exciting thinking of the future. I have a small question. That I understand that data is important to make a decision, but how much the health community, nurse and the doctor is capable to assimilate the data and make a sense out of it today?
I'm sorry, your question, how much?
How much the appetite for the doctors and the nurses to understand the whole gamut of data they get and make a sense out of it?
That's a really good question. And so what we do is don't provide all the data. We don't provide all the data. We provide what they're interested in. Nurses are interested in knowing which patients are starting to deteriorate and doing something early. So they need an alert on the early warning score. All the rest of it, they don't need to know. They don't need to know anything about what is happening, heart rate variability, sort of stuff. They don't need anything like that. It's very hard, by the way, to put in anything other than minute-by-minute data into most health records. Even that's difficult. But behind that, we have beat-by-beat data, second-by-second information about the physiology of a patient. It's just sitting there at the moment. And really what we're building up is a fabulous database, which is coupled with the clinical, the clinical evidence from what is happening in the hospital to the patient.
Hi, Magnus Jonten Karlsson, AstraZeneca. I'm interested in the home monitoring part. So first of all, have you started that? And if so, how many patients have you on track and record now? And what's been the learning in sort of the difference between doing the home monitoring and the hospital one?
We've done only 3 or 4 patients of several different studies at the moment, but they took a little while to get set up. So we have 3 different things. One is keeping patients out of hospital, elderly patients generally, and where there's been a pathway that's been developed between the ambulance district nurses and the GPs. This is in the UK around Oxford. What was missing was the monitoring element. Another one is detection of sepsis, early detection of sepsis in patients who have undergone chemotherapy, a high-risk group. And what we're looking for there is some physiological indicators in like the morning of day 1 on the onset. And we're seeing this stuff, but we've still got to do some more work on that. We've done the hospital side of that. We're now taking that to the home. And the other one is another interesting study in advanced liver disease. Patients who have been formerly brought into the hospital for tests. What we've been able to show is a new digital biomarker where you take the data from the patch and within 20 minutes you get exactly the same information. Not the same information, but exactly the same information on the patient as you do from what the hepatologists call their MELD test, which fundamentally takes blood and all day in the lab and a patient sitting there. So this is a really important thing. And so we now moved that from the hospital part of that study into the home. They'll report on that in one of the journals in a couple of months. So the home stuff is just beginning, but it's technically there's no difficulty really. Technically we've been shown that it's working. No, I know it looks. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time on the platform is making the platform reliable. What we know, you cannot take individual devices off the shelf and put them together and have a coherent, accurate system. It just doesn't work. We have to take the Android tablets we're using, rewrite some of the code, particularly around the radio drivers, to make it actually work in the way that is going to be useful for clinical use.
So Keith, there is a lot of interest in this. While you go down, I will send 2 questions with you that people will probably approach you if they are keen to get the answer. And one is IP and protection surrounding this. The other is data density as a driver. And when 3M decides to do something like this, how do you compete? But answer that question when people ask you.
Okay, thank you.